Hi guys, welcome back. We are working today on a 2006 Golf. This is a Golf GT and it has failed its annual inspection because of a broken suspension spring. So that's what we're going to be replacing today. Before we take these bolts off, before I actually get it up in the air, I'm going to loosen off that nut there. That's a 27 and that holds the end of the drive shaft. There you go, so that's now nice and loose, so we can crack on with taking the other wheel bolts out. Now, for those of you who haven't seen me do this trick before, basically what we're fighting against here is the fact that the anti-roll bar, the sway bar, is connected on both sides of the car, and I've only got one side of the car jacked up. So what that's doing is it's putting tension on the whole system, which is pushing this bar upwards, which is angling that down in the slot and preventing me from easily getting that out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to jack this corner up, and that will release. It compresses the spring slightly, of course, but that will release the upwards force that's being applied to the drop link here, the anti-roll bar, the sway bar link, and should enable us to easily pop that out of there. QED. All this is another little trolley jack, just squishing that spring just to compensate for the upward force coming from the other side of the car via the anti-roll bar. The holdfast on the end of this one is either going to be a hex end or it's going to be a 12 splined bit. This one is in fact a 12 splined bit. It's an 18mm on this one, but again, aftermarket can vary. You may find you have a flat end here to grab with an adjustable or something similar. But anyway, this does appear to be coming now. This will just take a few moments. There we go, loose enough to take off by hand. Now let's have a look at this. Let's have a look at this drop link and see if it can be saved or if it needs to be replaced. I do have a spare. Oh, okay, well there's the answer. It's toast. Yeah, okay, well at least you can see what's going on. It's basically a ball and socket in there, lots of grease and a little rubber boot to keep it attached, and this one has perished over the years. Well, we know we need to replace that. I've got a spare in there, super cheap anyway, so I'm just going to drop that out of the way, take the other end off that later on. Okay, so top side, most cars with a McPherson strut are going to have a similar arrangement as this. Just remove that rubber, lift it up, and here we go. There are one at the back just hiding around the corner there, two at the front, 13mm that we need to remove. Just to show you, you can get at that one at the back there just using hand tools without having to take the plastic panel and the wipers off and all the rest of it. Remember, we're not taking them off all the way at this point. Just loosening them, just to give a little bit of play down below. Right, they're nice and loose. Alright, now we need to remove the ABS sensor wire. Let's slide that out of its little grommet thing, which is easier said than done. There we go, starting to move now, so we'll just roll that out. You can see how badly corroded it is. I'll go over that with a wire brush after. This thing is rusted completely solid. I'm going to get a bit of penetrating oil on this rather than force it and break it. Obviously we can't use the torch on this because of the rubber hose here to the brake caliper. That's had a chance to soak for a while now, so I'm just going to use a flat bladed screwdriver here. You can see the rust flaking off that as I go. Keep that safe. Now I've just got to work this loose in the same way as the one up top. There we go. By the way, the reason that I didn't try and take that off is they do have a habit of shearing. This is rusted absolutely solid, so this is definitely the path of least resistance. Okay. There is a lot of rust on this. I really am going to have a bit of a hard time, so I'm going to get a wire brush out here, give that a good clean because we need to get some penetrating oil into that. That there needs to come off, and the bolt the other end, that's the pinch bolt that clamps onto the lower end of the suspension leg in the steering knuckle. So that's the next major bit of drama, is getting that loosened off and getting enough penetrant into this bit here to actually allow it to separate. That comes out of that. Much as I love 1A or 2 videos, you know, this is how it really is when you do this job, right? You're not going to have a nice shiny new car, nice shiny new parts. You're going to be fighting against rust. You're going to be fighting against friction. You're going to be fighting against bolts that are rounded off from previous box jobs and all the rest of it. So my advice to you with all of these jobs, clean all the rust off, blast as much penetrating oil in as you can. I mean, in truth, it doesn't make a massive lot of difference, but it'll make you feel better, and it might help. And if you can, of course, being very careful, give it a bit of heat as well. So, you know, rather than leaving the heavy measures to the end, we're going to open with the heat, open with the oil, open with the rust removal, and give ourselves the best chance of getting this thing off without rounding it off. Right, let's leave that to soak for a while. And on the other side is, what have we got in here? 12 spline bit, so I'm going to have to clean that up as well, which is can be a little bit tricky to do backhand, so I'll clean this one off camera, but I'll show you the end of this bolt again when we get there. That is what we are dealing with. So that's the end of the bolt, and at the other end is the knot that we were dealing with a few moments ago. So I'm going to leave that for 20 minutes or so with the penetrating oil on and come back to it. Okay, so the end of the bolt is a 14mm 12 spline bit. That's probably, well, that's one of 2 specialist tools you'll need for this job. They shouldn't be on too tight. And the other side is an 18mm. And a little bit of gentle persuasion to help that out. You can see there This is probably the original factory one. That definitely needs replacing. I will replace this and get one on order. That unfortunately is a dealership part. Right, so now we need to spread the back of the thing that's holding the end of this strut. So the strut goes into the knuckle. The knuckle has a pinch bolt that runs through that basically pulls it tight, clamps everything together. So to release it, we need to spread that back open, and for that you do need a special little tool. If you haven't seen these before, they're not particularly expensive, but basically what it's going to do is we're going to put that in the slot and twist it, and that's going to give us just enough force to open the joint at the back, and that will allow us to get even more penetrating oil down into the top and hopefully drive it off. So I'll get that installed. So there's the knuckle as before. Need to do quite a bit of cleanup on this, around here particularly, because we need to get the penetrating oil down into that joint there. And here, where the pinch bolt was clamping that tight, that is where this special little tool is going to go. So what we're going to do is slide that in and then basically twist it to apply just enough force to open that up a little. And that's it. And that stays in there until we're ready to undo it. There you go, close up. So it's slid in flat and then twisted round, just rotates and spreads it by just enough to open that joint up. Now the next job for me is to clean all of this up around here and get maximum penetrating oil into that groove. So here we are coming in from behind. There is another horribly corroded little bolt here, so we need to be super careful taking this out. It shouldn't be on with any great force, but that's just a standard hex end. I'm just going to blast a bit of penetrating oil onto that. And let's leave that a few minutes before removing that. Okay, here we are underneath, and just to show I'm keeping it real, there's the pile of rust that's rapidly falling off this. Next thing we need to do is remove these three nuts here. They hold the bottom ball joint in place. So with those removed, we'll be able to separate the lower control arm here from the bottom ball joint. And these are 16mm. They shouldn't be on with any massive force. They will be terribly rusty though. So, there we go. So make sure before you give it the beans that you have the socket properly seated, or you could tear a corner off. Now, because these are so rusty, I'm just going to bring them off just a little bit and then give them another blast with the wire brush on the threads. A bit more penetrating oil, maybe a bit more heat. Right, put those in a safe place, And at this point we should be loosening off here, so just a little bit of a persuader. And there we go, just to break that rust there. Okay, back to the front now with the 27mm again, to remove the bolt that holds the end of the drive shaft in place. Okay, now as you can see, I've got a block of wood there between the sway bar and the lower control arm, just to keep them separated so that the control arm can't grab all of these again at an inopportune moment. And I've cleaned off the rust and given a good few coats now of penetrating oil. I'm just spraying it onto the strut and letting it run down into the crack around the bottom. Okay, so just knock this through from the front. The drive shaft will come out from the back, and then we are hanging just on that one bolt at the top and supported on the track rod end. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring that little trolley jack back in just to support this. A lot of force on that. The drive shaft rod that is sitting there, so I'm just going to keep that tucked out of the way with another piece of wood. Just stop it rocking back over. And now I'm going to remove the last bolt at the top. A little bit of support back into this actually, just to catch it. Not lifting, just support. So that's the suspension leg released at the top. And now supporting this, I can let it fall down. Okay, we're there. What a palaver. And this is my problem. The top of that spring has basically sheared off. Quite how, not sure. But yeah, they're not supposed to look like that. So anyway, that's the disassembly part, right? And it's not particularly easy. It is a pain in the arse. Whole bunch of stuff you got to remember, and it's easier if you have a helping pair of hands that can assist you with lifting or positioning jacks and so on, but it is completely doable. Now I'm afraid this time round, and I have stated on many occasions that I totally despise the use of these things, I am going to have to use some coil spring compressors, right? If you need to use coil spring compressors, my advice to you is get 2 sets, and I'll show you why now. Okay, so these are spring compressors. Fairly simple in operation. They just grab the spring at 2 ends, and as you tighten them up, they squeeze it. A few things you need to do before you can use them fresh out the box. First one is lubricate the threads. Come lubricated, doesn't really matter what kind of grease you use. It's super important to make sure that those threads are indeed lubricated. Take your time. If you have to use them, probably best to buy your own, because then you can be sure that they've always been lubricated properly. And if you hire them from a local auto factors or whatever, which is fine. You know, they're only about 30 quid, so you know, not very expensive. But this probably won't have been done by the previous person that used them. Okay, so that's the preparation of the tools themselves. They're pretty straightforward. Part those. So whilst I want the threads on the tools to be well lubricated, I do not want any of this dust or grime that's built up all over the coil of the spring. I do not want any of that to allow those tools to slip. Now I'll come back to those tools in a sec, but what I'm using here is alcohol. It's just hand gel. I'm doing this to get rid of any grease or grime, knowing full well that it is definitely going to flash off and leave us with a completely clean, dry surface. Now, I've seen lots of people on YouTube use these horrible things. I've never seen anyone actually do this before, which I consider to be a fairly essential part of the process. We mitigate risk every way we can. These things are bloody dangerous. Never underestimate them. Right, so I'm going to let that dry. And I will just point out with these as well, if you have to get these, don't get one with just one hook at the end. Ideally, get ones with two, because they are a lot less likely to slip. If you've got just one hook, then it's possible that it's going to slip downhill, and if it does that on you, well, it's not offering any force. But with these ones, they are designed to hold themselves true. Okay, so I'm just going to start winding these on. We don't need to compress the whole spring to the size of your fist in the middle. We just need to take the tension off the end so we can remove that nut, disassemble it, squish a new spring down, insert the strut and all the rest of the gubbins into it, put the nut back on the end. That's all we need to do here. So we don't need to go crazy, but it is super important that everything is as secure as it possibly can be. Now, another thing we are absolutely not going to use with this tool is an impact gun. It takes a long time, yes, I get that, but it's a hell of a lot safer if you do this using hand tools, because with an impact gun, by the time you notice something going wrong, it could well be too late to do anything about it. Now that would be the only position I could get this top spring in, so I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to go for another link of the middle coil. And if all I do is squish this middle section, it's going to be enough. It's going to be enough to get the clamping force we need to remove the pressure that's being applied to the ends. So we'll just tighten these up a little at a time, and I mean a little, like half a turn. Flip it over. Same on the other side. That's better. Never ever put your fingers in gaps like that, because there is no way anyone is going to be able to get that off before your finger is effectively amputated. These things are dangerous. Don't underestimate them. But if you take your time, things will go slowly enough that you can see a problem coming, and if it looks like something's going wrong, walk away from it. Just stop. Walk away. Assess the situation. Come back. Never rush. look at your time, make sure that the tool is well serviced. Okay, right, so when you take the parts out, make sure that you lay them in the order that they need to go back in. Just take this out the other end. There's our broken spring. So what I'm going to do now is put these all in that order in a safe place, just behind the camera there, and I am going to now spend probably the next 5-10 minutes slowly releasing this. Nice new spring, and you can see how much of the old one's missing. About that much. So yeah, quite right that it should fail its MOT with that kind of stuff going on. I would rather know. Now what I'm going to do with this, or if you remember before, we couldn't go all the way to the end because of the way that it fits onto the receiving pieces. So I'm going to arrange these all very carefully around the middle. The 3 dots marked the bottom before. The end here is slightly more oval shaped. The other end is missing, of course, on this one, but it's round, so this is the way it's going to go in. Pull the end out. Wrong way. Oh, so frustrating. I'm going to have to go for one more round here of tightening, just to give myself an extra millimetre of thread. Oh, maybe. Oh, I think we're on. Yes, indeed. Right. I have threaded that bolt on the end. I just need to tighten that up. So I'll get on and do that off camera, and once it's tight then we're going to torque that down. I'll put the torque specs for all this stuff up per the Haynes manual later on, so stick around to the end or jump to the end if you need those torque specs. This is easier, by the way, if you have either a through access socket, so it's kind of like a normal socket, only you hold it with a spanner on the side and go through the hole at the end with the hold fast here. Or if you can get a 21mm offset spanner, and I have been unable to get a 21mm offset spanner. I've got a 20, I've got a 22, but I don't have a 21. So again, options are available, but because I want to just snug this down, this 22 is doing okay. Anyway, I'll crack on with this off camera, and then we're back onto the reinstall. Just a quick close-up here showing you how this little tool works, just to jam that slot open to either insert or remove the suspension leg. I just wanted to point out as well, look at all the corrosion that's going on in there. That was effectively sticking these two parts together, which makes the whole job more difficult. So I'm going to be cleaning that up, giving it a good load of copper grease, and hopefully that'll make the reassembly journey an awful lot easier. But yeah, these little tools, you can't really do without them on this job. It's the same with Fords, it's the same with quite a few of the European manufacturers. I think Audi and BMW and so on are very, very similar, but certainly this tool itself isn't particularly expensive. I think it was 10 quid. That's for the spreader socket set. That one's from Werkzeug, I think. Yes, it is. And that deals with clamps on VAG, so Volkswagen Auto Group, BMW, Citroën, Ford, Renault, etc. Very, very important little tool, so ask your local motor factor to get one in for you. That's more like it. Okay, so now we need to deal with the crap old drop link. Nice new one to stick on there. The old one's completely wrecked, and that is absolutely rusted solid on the back, so I haven't got a lot of time to play with today. I'm not going to take any prisoners with this one. I'm going to use an angle grinder and just chop it off. However, you need to be extremely careful to not damage the CV boot. So I'll just drape a rag around that, just to stop any sparks from affecting it. And then we can get on with cutting that off. Okay, safety first. Okay, so it's a 5mm hold on the inside of the end there. I'm going to use this T-bar squished in around the side of the wheel arch liner to hold that nice and solid, and get this new one that's attached. so that's tucked in nice and tight. I can now remove the spreader. Okay, so that's now properly seated all the way back down. We'll put the pinch bolt back in. I'm not going to nip it up all the way just yet, because there's no real need. It's all fairly tight anyway, and I might need to take this out again yet, so never say never. Next job is to get our drive shaft back in. One tip on this is that you can line them up using a screwdriver or some other kind of implement from the top, and once you've got one lined up, then the others will all follow. Remember, you might need to twist that bearing round at the very top there, which should be lined up nicely. Maybe a little bit of violence required. Started. Okay, so I'll tighten those three up now and I'll see you back down below. Alright, so at the top we're now attached, bolted in all three. So now I just need to get this prop shaft reinserted into that hole there. So I'm just going to raise this up gently. This is compressing the spring, so be super careful, of course, at all times. And then we can just twist that round and realign it there. There it is. I'll just grab that from the other side with the bolt. I'm not going to twist the bolt in all the way straight away, because as I mentioned before, there's always that risk of separating the bearings inside the constant velocity joint. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to just wiggle this around for a bit, make sure it's properly located from the back, which I think it is now. And as soon as I've got a few threads engaged on this 27mm, and the way to check that is to try it under force. If it pops off, you know you've not got engaged. Yeah, there you go. So that's at least a couple of the threads engaged. So I'm now going to release the pressure on the jack, and as it drops down, I'll push that over. Alright, so I'm just going to straighten the wheel up here. The reason we had it kinked over at that jaunty angle was to get the end of the drive shaft back in. That's now located. Okay, with all that in place, over. I'm now going to tighten up the ends of that drive shaft. And I'll talk all these at the end, but that is where we need to be for now. Right, so forgive the shaky hand. I have just got to freehand this to show you what's going on. So we've got the drive shaft back in. That needs to be torqued up. We've got the pinch bolt back in. Of course, that needs to be tightened and torqued up. Got these 3 bolts here on the lower control arm into the bottom ball joint. They need to be torqued up. And the last job of all is going to be basically just to wrap this up until that lines up with that hole. So I'll do that now. I think that's a 19. That is a 19. Where's this one on? I'll torque that up in a minute. Okay, and if you recall, in at the top here, we have to relocate the brake hose, and that's got its little metal clip that slides in to that groove there. So you kind of put the pipe through from the back and then pop that in from the top. I'm just going to tap that in with a hammer. It is spring loaded, so make sure you've got it located properly before tapping that. Okay, that's an excessive hammer, but it's the one I've got. Possibly one of the fiddlier jobs is getting this, that little square bit there, back into the appropriate channel here. Now I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes cleaning this up, but that just squishes back down. And then, as you'll have heard me mention before, I've got the rust off this, but everything is better just with a smidge of lube. So it doesn't really matter what you use. That just kind of rolls back in place. So there we go, all reassembled. Brand new spring. That's all looking good. So I'll get those torqued up and put the wheel back on. I'm certainly not going to insult your intelligence by making you watch me go around hearing a click, 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 and then put a wheel on. So hopefully that's all been useful. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time. Here come those torque settings. That's how much rust fell off. Don't be expecting this to be a clean job, they never are. Take it easy, guys.